And because of that, of the problems that go into court, there was a big press conference, and it made the local papers about a lawsuit. It's not a class action, but it's a conglomeration of people suing in federal court the Minnesota statutes on child protection. So we're going to see that press conference here. Most of the newspapers covered it, but it's sad, and this is a big case. Something's going to happen here. Child support services may be shut down. It's real potential and likely to happen. So let's watch the press conference. Sometime.
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm following in Dwight Mitchell. It's a tough job. He's a very good speaker, and he's a very good client, but he's a very aggressive client. And I'm sort of shocked at how far he's gotten with this idea that it happened to me. My children were taken away without a proper foundation in law, and I'm going to start an association to do that. And so these people have been attracted by Dwight's leadership and Dwight's cause. And this is a victims group. I mean, it should shock everyone here and everyone watching. This is a victims group. I mean, this is no different than Jeff Anderson's group when Jeff Anderson sued the Catholic Church over child abuse. It's just here we're not representing 600 victims of sexual abuse. We're representing thousands of Minnesota children who have been separated from their parents unjustly. When we started the first time about a couple months ago, I was really focused on Dwight's facts. But as Dwight introduced me to this victims group, my eyes started open to see what a broad systematic problem we have in Minnesota. And so the problem is, first, the commissioner of the Department of Human Services is in charge of everything. The commissioner, of course, advises the legislature on how to reform statutes and so forth. And so when we look at the statutes, we have all these problems. And these problems have been recognized by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. And the problem basically is that these statutes have not been drafted in a careful way that when the government takes the child from the parent, that the government has to show a substantial level of harm being prevented. So can you believe that? So I started off with the spanking thing with Dwight. Dwight's child was taken for 22 months. 2 of them were taken for 5 months because of an ordinary spanking. And then all of a sudden we're finding out all these other cases, a lot of them based on neglect. But the central problem and where everything comes together is Minnesota statutes do not require the government to show in court that there's some harm being prevented when the child is taken away from the parent. So what are we left with? We're left with statutes regulating parental conduct. I mean, basically manners. I mean, a lot of these parents here are victims because the social worker said, you're being uncooperative. Well, since when is being uncooperative with a government official mean you lose your kids? And this is all kind of exponentially important because we have single parent families now. So the consequence of having the statutes drafted badly and the commissioner not administering them according to the Constitution and the courts not keeping an eagle eye out for abuses is that we're having all these separations that are unnecessary. In Dwight's case, the psychologist said, Dwight, the kids aren't getting counseling because of what you did. They're getting counseling because they're separated from you. And none of one in the government thinks that's ironic. Because, when you think about, we have great sympathy for the victims of sexual abuse in Jeff Anderson's case. But these kids are separated from their parents, in Dwight's case, for 22 months, no contact. That's bad. I mean, they're both horrific. And you can talk to these victims here, and they can talk about the experiences their children have had, the ones that have been returned or have had a chance to visit. So what has changed with the litigation strategy is we actually started with Dwight just saying, I want justice. And then he started the association. The association has succeeded beyond his wildest dreams as a victims association. So I'm not Jeff Anderson, but Dwight Mitchell is acting as Jeff Anderson. Jeff Anderson collected clients, victims of sexual abuse, and he came forward and said, we got to clean this up. Now, it was different in a way because there's a big pot of money at the end. And of course, the establishment, the county attorneys, were on Anderson's side. Dwight doesn't have a big pot of money for all these people. All he can do is get an injunction to fix it. He can stop Child Protection Services from operating under the unconstitutional statutes. It would be a statewide injunction, and that'll help a great deal. The other thing is the county attorneys, they're on the other side on this one, right? So in the Jeff Anderson deal, Ramsey County Attorney Choi sued the Catholic Church. We're not going to have any county attorneys come out on our side. No way. The county attorneys are charging these people for neglect, malicious punishment, whatever. The county attorneys are involved in advising on the civil side. So the county attorneys are part of the establishment in this one. But what we do have is a federal court, and we have U.S. Court of Appeals decisions in the case in Iowa, the Allsager case, finding that Iowa's child protection statutes were very similar to the ones in Minnesota, were struck down. So today we're communicating with the judge and lining up to have a summary judgment motion hearing on an injunction. And the big point here is that we're going to be sending our communications to the judge later today, and that Dwight is announcing that he has a victims group. And in our first press conference, we didn't have that. And we're going to continue to meet with the press and continue to have press conferences as we have more victims. Why? Because the media should know when this is happening. This is our government, and the government is taking children away from parents on extraordinarily meager facts. I mean, this case here with the medical neglect, which we'll talk about, it involved simply taking a child out of a hospital against medical advice. Now, is that medical neglect? Well, the statute says you can terminate parental rights permanently because of medical neglect, but it doesn't define what medical neglect is. Medical neglect, to justify separating a child from a parent, you'd have to show that you're preventing some harm to the child. Is it medical neglect to go get a second opinion or a third opinion? Also, the statutes, as we've discussed before, don't have a good definition of neglect generally. One part of the statute says you got to give required care to your child. The next section says you got to give special care to your child if they need it. Well, what's required care? What's special care? These are not carefully drafted to meet the requirement that when the government permanently terminates parental rights, that it's preventing some harm to the child. And all of these people here are victims, and they have to be taken seriously. And it's not that we can just shove them aside. I mean, maybe that was acceptable before all these lawsuits against the Catholic Church, but now it's not. These are victims, just like those other children were victims, and we didn't make sure that we protect children, even if it's protecting children from our government.
What a powerful statement. Protect children even if we have to protect them from the government. Emily Piper, who is the Human Services Commissioner, said the state has pressed, this is according to the Star Tribune, the state has pressed forward with a series of changes recommended by Governor Dayton's 2015 Special Task Force on Child Protection. The counties and the state are now spending more on child protection and have hired dozens more social workers. The Department of Human Services, which oversees child protection, has also taken steps to reduce long-standing racial disparities through enhanced training and targeting grants to local social services. That, friends, is smoke and mirrors. That's not the issue. The issue is we got statutes that are unconstitutional, that are violating parental rights, that are really abusive of parents and children, and you got a Department of Human Services that's willing to ignore the statutes, but take advantage of the ones that are unconstitutional. And the real issue, as Dwight Mitchell points out in the press conference, is it boils down to money, okay, and how the Department of Human Services makes money. Now, it's not up on the website, but pretty soon, under YouTube/SpeechlessMN, you will be able to go there and like my page, you'll get the videos, but I will upload the press conference so you can see the whole thing. It is a tearjerker. It's a tough deal, but you need to hear it. You need to know what the state is doing to our families.